everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Frugina Strauss, and I work at UN Habitat's Regional Office for Africa, where I lead the climate program. And I would like to welcome you today to our event on smart urban resilience, partnerships, and integrated approaches in Africa. I am very pleased to begin by welcoming our first keynote speaker, who will be Mr. Zainu Umar, the manager for the Resilience Hub for Africa of UNDP. Mr. Zainu, would you come join us, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to recognize the presence of Director Nyambe from African Union, and of course, commissioners from Malawi and the rest of the African Union member states, which is very crucial for this thing. And I'm very happy to recognize all of you, and I would like to also say welcome to this very important event. On behalf of the United Nations Development Program, I would like to thank you. The United Arab Emirates, thanks the United Arab Emirates, UAE, for hosting this important conference. I wish to register a vote of appreciation to the ICLEI and UN Habitat for convening this pavilion on urbanization, spotlighting the needs urban communities, particularly those otherwise left behind. Africa is urbanizing faster than any other continent. Africa cities are at the center of global conversation on sustainable urbanization. Realizing the AU's Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 is a contingent on our collective ability to transform African cities into economic powerhouses, innovation hubs, and sites of opportunities for a better life for all, especially its youth. These are unprecedented times for Africa regarding disaster loss. This year alone, we suffered earthquakes in Morocco, cyclones in Mozambique and Malawi, Madagascar, and floods in Kenya and Libya, with unredeemable losses to life, livelihoods, heritage, infrastructure, and economy. This event, especially the climate-related hazards, are projected to increase. In Africa, cities are already facing crisis, with rising populations putting severe pressure on urban capacities to meet needs, with undeserved informal settlement disproportionately affected. Cities at the frontier of conflict risk and those at crossroads of major socioeconomic transformation are increasingly vulnerable. Integrating a multi-sectoral, risk-informed approach to urban development and planning is critical for sustainable urbanization in the continent. The AUC, UNDP, and UN Habitat recognize this urgency. Jointly, we have pursued a multi-tiered and integrated approach to urban resilience building that recognizes the importance of local, national, regional, and continental policy and action coherence. Our joint regional program for smart urban resilience in Africa, the JRP, supports urban-rural linkage adopts an integrated participatory area-based method and focuses on cities as the frontier of risk, climate conflict, migration, and socio-economic and political transformation to redefine the smart city discourse in Africa. With this, the JRP seeks to implement the Continental Africa Urban Resilience Program developed under AUC's leadership with support from the Sweden-funded Sahel Resilience Project. In this, UNDP will harness its integrated role to deliver this collective vision and ambition for resilient urbanization in African countries. Building on its established partnership with governments, local organizations, and development partners, and geographic footprints, UNDP will leverage its extensive experience in working on governance, risk-informed development, inclusive growth, climate change adaptation, and climate risk financing to advance smart urban resilience. This partnership and approach advocated through the JRP is backed by solid ongoing initiatives on the ground, as well as we will learn in the panel. The Sahel Resilience Project, supported by the government of Sweden, is a prime proof of concept, which applies multi-tiered resilience building approach across the humanitarian development peace nexus. In addition to supporting AUC develops the Africa Urban Resilience Program, it will support to operationalize it in West Africa in collaboration with ECOWAS and partners. With UN Habitat, the project is collaborating with 8 Sahelian governments in articulating the spatial development strategy for the Sahel for evidence-based decision-making on urban resilience. It also supports inclusive resilience action planning in municipalities to inform investment for urban resilience. Operationalizing Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 through such an approach capitalizes on opportunities for strengthening networks of human settlements, rural-urban linkage, and their interdependencies for unlocking inclusive, resilient, and sustainable regional development. Notwithstanding the progress made, current efforts remain inadequate to build resilience to climate crisis. There is a need for concerted international efforts to support African governments to unlock public and private domestic and international financial resources to deliver resilient cities and regions. Sound urban resilience approach at all levels, from local to national to regional, is needed for the hour. We call upon all development partners to join us in this mission and support the multi-phased implementation and resource mobilization efforts of the joint regional program for smart urban resilience in Africa. The choice African countries make today will determine the development trajectory of the continent and, importantly, the resilience of the foundation on which we build the Africa we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks, Mr. Umar. And now, in order to open our session today with the keynote speech, we have the honor of having Commissioner Nyambe. Commissioner Nyambe, please join on the podium.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. to secure my job, I have to say that I'm not a commissioner, but I'm rather a director for sustainable environment and blue economy. Of course, that's on a lighter note. I would want to recognize also Dr. Zain Umar, who is the acting regional manager for UNDP. And of course, the commissioners among us and all the distinguished delegates or participants. Just to say that we are grateful that all of you could make it to this very important, should I say, event. Important in the sense that urban areas have become notorious for disasters or for being prone to disasters. And as such, there's a concern for everybody to make sure that we are able to put mechanisms in place to be able to address some of those challenges. And it's therefore important to also emphasize what has been said before, that the population in Africa is rising at a very fast rate. And linked to that, of course, is the issue of urbanization. And that comes with its own challenges as well as benefits. I do not think that population rise by itself is an evil thing, because it also renders us with the youth who can be able to address some of the challenges that we face, especially when it comes to issues of innovation as well as technologies. And of course, they are there as a source of labor. However, there are challenges in the sense that with so much people in cities, the infrastructure that we have currently are not sufficient to be able to cater for those people. But some of the infrastructure, of course, they are not well maintained. But in addition to that, we have noticed that with so many people coming into cities for better jobs as well as maybe better services, some of them end up building in riverbeds, for example, or some of the margin lands, which are actually prone to some of those disasters. Therefore, it's for that reason that we feel there's a strong case for us to be able to make sure that we address vulnerability within the cities. And then by so doing, we are able to save lives as well as properties. And we have worked with the UNDP with their support through the Sahel Resilience Program to put up a program that we are calling Africa Urban Resilience Program. And that is supported by actually the government of Sweden. And we have also, of course, worked with the UN Habitat in that process to make sure that collectively we are able to put up this very important program that can respond to some of the challenges that we are actually facing as a continent. And what is also critical is the fact that this program is actually informed by a number of frameworks within the continent. We have got, of course, the global ones, such as the Sendai framework, but we also have a program of action to be able to help us implement the Sendai framework within the African continent. And we also have what we call the AU, or the African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy, which is for 2020 to 2022 to 2032. We have got the Green Recovery Action Plan, which also actually has resilient cities as one of its pillars. So basically, we are transforming those frameworks, or making sure that they inform this program. And by so doing, we can be able to move towards achieving the goal of Agenda 2063. And this program actually emphasizes issues of sustainability, inclusivity, making sure that our development is risk-informed, as well as ensuring that we have got economic benefits, or we generate economic benefits within those cities. And therefore, I would want to invite all the partners that may be present here who share the same sentiments to be able to join us with the UNDP as well as UN Habitat to roll out this program, so that we can be able to build a more resilient, inclusive, and prosperous cities within the continent. And with that, I just want to emphasize the fact that as the African Union Commission, we remain committed to this partnership and to those who want to join us moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Nyambe, and apologies for the slip of tongue. Thank you very much to both of our keynote speakers for being with us today and for setting the stage for what will hopefully be a very lively and engaging conversation where we will actually dive in together with our panelists into some of the critical issues around urban resilience, as well as some solutions, innovations that are already present in the countries when we actually look at the case by cases. But before we begin with the panel discussion, I wanted to frame the conversation by just giving a little bit more background information about this partnership, because this is actually quite a monumental partnership that I think we're all very proud of, the African Union Commission, UNDP, and UN Habitat. And we're also right now at a quite critical juncture where we're looking to expand this partnership to other regional and national and local entities. Of course, we are here today at the Multi-Level Action and Urbanization Pavilion, and so multi-level action for climate is really the foundation of our discussions here, and that is also a foundation of this program. So I just will take 2 minutes to explain the Joint Regional Program itself, and then we will dive into the discussion with our 5 panelists, where we won't talk so much about the program, but rather about what are the experiences in the countries, which, of course, this program is also looking to tackle. So the overall framework for the Joint Regional Program is actually the Africa Urban Resilience Program of the African Union. And as you see here, this is a program that is centered around enhancing urban resilience in African cities and urban centers. And it is structured around the 5 pillars that you see here on the screen. And of course, ultimately, the goal is to reduce disaster losses and enhance sustainable development across the entire African region. We could go to the next one. Exactly. So starting off from this huge program of the African Union, we narrow down to how do we actually operationalize that. So we have developed together, African Union, UNDP, and UN Habitat, what we call the Joint Regional Program on Smart Urban Resilience. So what this is that the Joint Regional Program is essentially an implementation mechanism for this broader, larger African Urban Resilience Program. And so this is how we actually do the work in the countries and the cities in the region. This is just a quick overview structure of how that program is operationalized. We could go to the next one. Right. So what are we trying to do with this program? Obviously, when we're looking at the issue of resilience in Africa, it is a very, very broad subject. So what we've tried to do as the partners in this program is try to narrow down to what are those key typologies of cities that we would like to focus our attention to. And so what we have identified are the 3 key typologies that you see over here on this slide. The first one is, of course, the issue of secondary cities and smaller settlements, where we still really have a critical opportunity to make them more resilient, whereas, of course, retrofitting bigger megacities is always much more of a challenge. And we really see that as a major contributor to sustainable development in the region, to really reinforce those settlements that are now coming up and still have opportunity for good planning. Second is informal settlements and urban centers. Of course, we all know that informality is a major challenge in the region. And so we are addressing specifically informal settlements. And finally, we have border towns and strategic nodes. So really, we're seeing these areas that are oftentimes on borders where there's high levels of migration, where there's significant economic activities taking place. And the 3 sort of cross-cutting issues that we're looking at are climate change and extreme events, conflicts and displacement, and rapid socioeconomic transition. So of course, it's impossible to isolate any city as fitting into only any one of these categories, but we're trying to identify cities to be a part of this program that fit into, that face challenges that really fit into at least one of them. We could go to the next slide. This is our ambition right here on this slide. So our ambition with this program is to reach 10 cities at the frontiers of conflict risk, 10 cities at the frontiers of socioeconomic transformation, 10 cities at the frontiers of climate risk, and also 5 systems of interconnected settlements, for example, as in the Sahel, because we cannot, especially when we're looking at resilience and disaster prevention, we cannot look at only cities in isolation. We also need to look at the interactions between cities and between cities, peri-urban and rural areas as well. We could go to the next slide. And this is just a quick snapshot of an example of what are some of the initiatives that the different partners are bringing, and what are some of our innovations, some of our tools. You can see here images, for example, of elevated schools from Mozambique, which are flood-proof and have been standardized across the country. You could see examples of integrated resilience building based on participatory planning, where we're looking at how we can build resilience not only through investing in green and gray infrastructure, but also nature-based solutions, solid waste management practices, community mobilization, awareness raising, and other both soft and hard activities. So this program actually comes with this suite of different tools, innovations, best practices that are being put forward by the various partners in the program. And of course, we hope that we could continue to enlarge this so that we could really tailor our interventions to the specific needs of each of the cities that are participating in this program. So I think we could go to the next slide. This was the last slide on the program, and now we really want to dive into having a conversation about what's going on when it comes to urban resilience in Africa. And we have a wonderful panel of 5 speakers who are joining us from all across the continent, from different countries. So hopefully we have a diverse representation. I would like to introduce each of the panelists one at a time and ask them to please join us in the front. This will be a more intimate conversation, so I think it will enable us to speak more freely if we're speaking together from here. So first we have Mr. Charles Kalemba from the Department of Disaster Management of Malawi. Mr. Kalemba, would you please join us in the front? Then we have Ms. Dadi Diakite, who is from the Directorate General of Civil Protection in Mali. If you could please join us, Ms. Diakite. Then we have Dr. Akinola Olakunde from the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development of Nigeria. Then we have Monsieur Mohamed Abdou, the Director of Territorial Planning from the Ministry of Urban Planning and Housing of Comoros. And finally, we have my colleague, Marcia Guambe, from UN Habitat's country office in Mozambique. Yes, please, I will sit here, and I hope that you all have your headsets because we will be a bilingual panel. Okay, so I would like to begin by posing the first question to Commissioner, and in this case, I am actually correct with Commissioner from the Department of Disaster Management Affairs of Malawi, Commissioner Kalemba. As Malawi continues its efforts in building resilience against urban disasters, could you please share insights into the experiences and challenges faced by your country in implementing integrated approaches for urban resilience?
Thank you very much, Faustino, and all members present. Yeah, I think let me start by saying that Malawi is currently experiencing a lot of climate-related disasters together with our neighbors, Mozambique, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, and the countries around us. And just this year, we were hit extremely by Cyclone Freddy. Now, what happened was normally our cities are not usually on the path of these climatic disasters this far till this year. So I'll give a practical example that when we were doing mud hazard contingency planning in 2022, we did not look at the cities as major areas where we were going to be affected. So it came to us as a surprise when we discovered that Blantyre City, which is our commercial city, was heavily hit. And it was heavily hit by mudslides and landslides. Now, as it is the case in most African cities, we have cities pro, where people have constructed in areas which are high risk. And when the mudslides and the landslides happened, a good number of locations were actually affected and people buried. Now, as I said, we had planned for us being able to respond to flood-prone areas, but this is mudslide. And therefore, it took us by surprise. And we had to work so fast to move what we had pre-positioned in the flood-prone areas to come to an urban setting and to see how we would work to save people. But as I've said, these are unplanned areas. So even for you to go to those areas, it's not easy. This morning I was looking at, I was listening to the flooding that is taking place in Chennai in India. And one of the locals there is saying, before the constructions that have taken place, the waters would go to the major rivers. But this time, because of the construction, you can't, the water is not going to the major rivers and therefore flooding the localities. So it's a similar situation, which is in Malawi. Most of the cities, formerly they were planned, but now they are not. People have constructed nilewile and a situation where if you were to replan and rebuild, it's not as easy. So these are the situations that we are facing. And in terms of disaster management, fire management, it's not an easy task. And therefore, when we are looking at programming where we have to make our cities smart and the disaster, I would say disaster able or disaster ready, it's an issue that we need really to work very hard to make sure that we work around the system and come up with systems. Unfortunately, we are not as fast as things are happening. So I would like to start by saying that our major problem is we are not as fast as the things are happening. So we need to put up speed and mobilize and save our cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Indeed, I visited Malawi just after Freddie, and the situation was very, very complex. I think it was very, very well put that we're constantly trying to put out fires, and we don't have enough ability and enough time to properly prepare, and that's really where there needs to be a transition made. Now let's go to towards West Africa, and I would like to invite Ms. Diakite from Mali to answer the next question. Ms. Diakite, disasters and climate change continue to challenge the well-being of millions of people living in Mali, as well as their development prospects, including those living in peri-urban, urban, and rural human settlements. Can you please share insights into challenges faced by Mali in this regard? How has the Dirección General de la Protección Civil in Mali been addressing these challenges across urban and urbanizing areas?
OK. Bonsoir tout le monde. Au Mali, les défis liés aux catastrophes naturelles et au changement climatique incluent la fréquence accrue des sécheresses, des inondations, des vents violents et des tempêtes de poussière ou de sable. Ces événements mettent en péril la sécurité alimentaire, les ressources en eau et l'infrastructure. Les communautés urbaines, périurbaines et rurales sont toutes touchées, avec des conséquences sur la santé, l'éducation et les moyens de subsistance. Les pressions sur les ressources exacerbent ces problèmes, créant un contexte complexe où la résilience communautaire est essentielle. À cet effet, la Direction générale de la protection civile tente de relever les défis en milieu urbain et périurbain à travers un renforcement des capacités institutionnelles et techniques, en renforçant son effectif qui est passé de moins de 700 en 2008 à plus de 5000 en 2013. Ce personnel est reparti dans les capitales régionales et les zones à fort risque de catastrophe selon les statistiques. Oui, beaucoup d'efforts restent à faire car l'objectif est de couvrir en service de protection civile professionnelle l'ensemble du territoire. Elle est à moins de 40% de son objectif actuellement, d'où un besoin pressant à ce niveau. Elle tente de relever également les défis à travers le développement de quelques outils, comme l'application SOS Sécurité, qui est une application et logiciel visant à alerter, orienter, conseiller les communautés sur les informations hydrométéorologiques, les alertes, les urgences et plein d'autres fonctionnalités. Cette application est aussi un outil de remontée d'informations des communautés vers des structures centrales sous forme d'alertes et de façon géoréférencée. Elle soutient également les efforts du gouvernement à travers le renforcement du système d'alerte précoce en vue d'intégrer la résilience à tous les niveaux. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Thank you for sharing those examples and highlighting the importance of early warning systems and enabling early warning systems in the region. Next, we will move to, we will stay in West Africa, and we will go to Dr. Akinola Olakunde, the Director and Head of the Department of Urban and Regional Development from the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in Nigeria. Professor Olakunde, in Nigeria, where in addition to the large cities, and you certainly have some very, very large ones, in fact, the biggest one in the region, I believe, small and intermediate cities are also fast urbanizing. Can you please elaborate on leveraging the role of urban-rural linkages in building urban resilience? Can you share your experience and initiatives supported by the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and partners that look at the interlinkages between urban and urbanizing human settlements, including small and intermediate urban settlements? What have been the key learnings from such initiatives?
Thank you, the moderator, co-panelists. Nigeria is a special country. We have the Lagos there, which is a bigger city with a very large population. And we have some other fast-growing fast-growing cities in the country. Nigeria has a lot of challenges with with the urban areas because of lack of adequate planning. And where we have planning, there are issues of lack of implementation of these plans. So it affects the development of these cities. But going down to the question asked, we know the issue of resilience or smart city resilience has a link with the issue of linkages, risk, and the enabler of resilience. And you cannot talk of resilience without looking at the interrelationship of all this, because it's what will affect the planning and the delivery of infrastructure and even development interventions. So these are quite key. And when you are talking of issue of resilience, we should even look beyond the issue of the major cities, because we have smaller cities, we have the rural areas. And apart from that, we have the urban, the peri-urban, and the suburbs. All these have influence on the resilience of the city. So it's better a broad look is given to the issue of resilience in its entirety. So that is why it is quite important. And because you have to look at suburb and the peri-urban, because they are actually in between the rural and the urban areas. A lot of activities are taking place in that place. They share the characteristics of the urban area as well as that of the rural area. Whereas in the rural area, you also have to look at them being a source of raw materials to the cities. Issue of lack of infrastructure affect the resilience of the rural area, and many other issues which affect this. So it's a holistic approach, and you have to look at the rural-urban continuum when you are talking of resilience, the linkage that you have in between these rural and the urban area. That's when we can actually solve the issue of resilience. But let me come to this other issue of what the approaches. I think concerning the approaches to building a smart resilience for the city, an integrated approach that takes the region, takes the rural area, and takes the city is the way to go. Even the SDG and the New Urban Agenda emphasize this: urban and territorial planning and development. These are the ways to go in ensure a resilient, safe, and sustainable city. But let me emphasize on a project which the ministry was involved in conjunction with the UN Habitat and the UNDP. And this was funded by government of Sweden. This particular project has been mentioned here, both by Dr. Zenu and Director Yambe. This project, the Sahel project, Sahel Resilience Project, is a project that cut across 8 countries in the Sahel region of West Africa, starting from Mauritania through Senegal to Chad, Nigeria, Chad, Burkina Faso, and all others. And these particular projects tend to look at the spatial development strategy that will suit this particular region so that they can be resilient. Because this particular region is a region prone to conflict, prone to disaster, prone to climate change issue. So these particular projects, which the ministry was happy to be part of, cut across the 500 local government areas in that region, and 232 of the local government areas are in Nigeria. And these study show that, first of all, the study started with a primary data collection on infrastructure and services needed. Also, it also went ahead to do secondary data collection on demography, natural resources, and all others. And it even went further to do a macro analysis of the socioeconomic, cultural, and the spatial fabric of the region. And this study came up with a lot of issues. It identified disaster conflicts, refugee, transborder issue, and a lot of these issues. So with this, it now came out that you can really solve issue of resilience in cities or network of human settlements without having a national or regional approach to it. So that conforms with what I said earlier about the new urban agenda and SDG, emphasizing on urban and territorial planning and development. Going further, in Nigeria, I think Nigeria also, these projects was equally was taken to a lower level. And this project, a local government in Nigeria was taking, that's Geri, where Lambodo, a town, a community and urbanizing town was considered. A framework of action was developed with the people in a participatory approach, and actionable recommendations were made. And from this actionable recommendation, it was found out that the rural area and the city and even the area in between are intertwined. If you are going to talk of the resilience of one, you have to consider others along. And that's the way to build a smart and resilient human settlements. Concerning lessons learned about this project, especially about this project, it shows that the regional approach or national approach to human settlement, resilience, planning and development is the way to go. That's what will ensure a smart resilience for any country. Also, it's was realized because the local initiative, the other project that I said was done, it shows that local actions are quite needed in coming up with the resilience. When the people participate, they bring in their local knowledge. They also, other local initiatives were brought in conjunction with the partners. And these made all of them to buy into this particular project. They came with suggestions of what measures to take and what is to be done. So that was one of the lessons learned about that particular initiative. And lastly, it shows that there should be a commitment and concerted effort if you want our urban centers to be resilient, because we need commitment and concerted effort, both the technical and the financial partner. And even the locals and other stakeholders should show commitment to this cause. And it's by so doing that we can actually make impactful gain on resilience aspects of our urban area. Because if we don't upscale such, especially the vulnerable areas which have been identified in the slide, like the slum areas and many others, will continue to persist. So these are some of the benefits we got from this engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olakunde. And thank you so much for really embracing the spirit of the multi-level action pavilion and sharing your experiences, not just from the level of the national level of Nigeria, but also the city level of Labondo, as well as the importance of looking at regional and transboundary issues as well as with the network of cities you mentioned. Now we will travel quite far east, back in the other direction, and we're going to hear from our speaker, who is our only speaker representing one of the African small island developing states, Mr. Mohamed Abdou, who's the Director of Territorial Planning at the Ministry of Urban Planning and Housing of Comoros. Monsieur Abdou, given the particular challenges that small island developing states, or SIDS, face in terms of disaster preparedness and resilience building, can you elaborate on the specific obstacles encountered by Comoros in these areas over the past year? How is the Ministry of Urban Planning and Housing addressing these challenges to enhance the overall resilience of the islands?
Bon, merci, madame. Chère assistance, bon, comme vous l'avez dit, s'il y a des endroits au monde qui sont beaucoup plus exposés aux catastrophes, ça ne peut être que les îles. Donc, ce sont les îles qui sont très, très exposées. Quand je prends l'exemple de mon pays, les Comores, donc exposés au risque des cyclones, des inondations, il y a le volcan encore qui peut aussi surgir. Donc, tous ces risques-là pour un petit pays, un petit territoire, avec beaucoup d'enjeux et de défis, c'est pas vraiment facile à relever. Toutefois, on a essayé avec les moyens dont le pays dispose d'abord pour savoir comment faire en sorte qu'on puisse gérer des situations de ce genre quand ça arrive. Donc, on a des défis en ce qui concerne les cadres institutionnels et juridiques. On a des défis également parce qu'il y a un manque de capacité technique et manque aussi d'expérience dans le cadre de préparation de ces événements. Quand je parle de ça, ce n'est pas seulement pour les Comores. Quand vous prenez les îles, c'est à peu près la même chose. Donc, pour faire face à ces situations, le ministère de l'aménagement du territoire devait agir d'abord en commençant par ces questions de cadre légal, c'est-à-dire aligner les textes qui sont inadaptés actuellement au cadre global. C'est pourquoi, à travers un projet qu'on appelle projet Kenet, qui est aussi venu d'un cyclone qui a frappé les Comores en 2019, la Banque mondiale nous a accordé un petit financement pour à la fois améliorer le cadre légal, mais aussi commencer à réfléchir sur les outils de planification. Donc, c'est pourquoi, à travers ce financement, nous avons eu l'appui de l'ONU Habitat, qui nous a assistés pour faire quoi? La révision du code de l'urbanisme et de la construction, pour intégrer tous les aspects qui n'étaient pas tenus compte en ce qui concerne les changements climatiques. Deuxièmement, élaborer une politique nationale de développement urbain et de l'habitat pour qu'on ait une vision par rapport à ces questions qui nous sont sur la tête. Et en plus de cela, l'ONU Habitat nous assistait également à élaborer des termes de référence sur ce qu'on appelle le plan de développement urbain de la ville de la capitale, en commençant par ça, parce qu'on ne peut pas, avec les moyens dont nous disposons, on ne peut pas faire l'ensemble des villes de l'archipel. On a commencé par la plus grande ville. Donc, ces TDR-là devront faire l'objet d'une étude qui nous permettra d'approfondir un certain nombre d'éléments. Mais j'en reviens à quelque chose qui est très important. Nous, comme on a des moyens suffisants, on compte beaucoup sur l'appui extérieur. Donc, on a eu la chance, dans le cadre d'un centre régional qui s'appelle DIMSUR, qui regroupe 4 pays de l'Afrique australe. Il y a nos camarades de Malawi qui font partie de ce DIMSUR, il y a Madagascar, il y a Mozambique, il y a les Comores. Ils ont développé un outil qu'ils appellent CityRap. CityRap, c'est une planification du territoire qui conduit à des actions concrètes. C'est une planification qui se fait dans le cadre participatif, où on implique tous les acteurs locaux, nationaux, pour réfléchir sur le développement d'un territoire. Et à partir de cet outil-là, on élabore un plan d'action. Et le plan d'action est un plan d'action qui émane de tous ces acteurs-là. Dans ce plan d'action, nous avons eu également la chance parce que quand ils ont défini le plan d'action, ils ont arrêté des priorités. Et parmi les priorités qui se posaient au niveau de la ville de Moroni, pour commencer là, il y avait des problèmes d'inondation. Donc, on a réfléchi sur des questions de canalisation des eaux, le drainage. Mais vous voyez, quand on travaille en collaboration, ça a donné quand même un projet intégré. Parce que ce projet de drainage nous a permis de faire quoi? De faire de canalisation, mais aussi de créer des bassins de rétention, mais aussi de construire des citernes. Donc, quand on fait les bassins de rétention, on retient l'eau et ça va servir à l'agriculture urbaine. Donc, vous voyez, à partir des solutions trouvées par les acteurs, on arrive à une solution, à une réponse intégrée où tout le monde trouve son compte. Donc, ça, c'est une approche que nous voulons quand même développer au niveau du pays. Et puis, nous, on insiste beaucoup par l'expérience que nous avons appris des autres, même le professeur l'a dit tout à l'heure, la planification, c'est très important. Parce que quand vous planifiez, vous êtes obligé de vous interroger, de diagnostiquer, d'analyser, de poser toutes les questions, y compris après, c'est-à-dire la mise en œuvre, le suivi, l'évaluation. Mais quand vous ne planifiez pas, n'est-ce pas? Donc, vous agissez ponctuellement et ça ne donne pas toujours le bon résultat. Donc, je ne vais pas monopoliser la parole. J'ai voulu juste donner certains éclaircissements par rapport à la situation des Comores. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Directeur. And thank you very much for highlighting not only the importance of planning, but participatory planning for urban resilience building, which is, I think, quite a critical message. Now, moving to our last speaker, we have Ms. Marcia Gwamba, who is an urban resilience expert at UN Habitat country office in Mozambique, and who is also the project manager for an adaptation fund project that UN Habitat is implementing in the country. And she will be, I think, focusing mostly on the local level of the multi-levels. So, Ms. Gwamba, in your role overseeing the implementation of integrated resilience building measures in Chokwe, Mozambique, could you share specific examples of successful initiatives that have effectively enhanced the city's resilience to various hazards? How have these measures been integrated across sectors, and what role does community involvement play in this process?
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone, and my core panelists. It's an honor to be here, coming from a country like Mozambique that is extremely vulnerable to natural hazards, and talk about Chokwe, where I had the pleasure to work with for the last 13 years. And responding to your question, I would like to tell a story about Chokwe on how actually resilience is being built with extremely and entirely engagement of local community, where the voices of everyone is actually integrated into decision making. So everyone is part of this planning process and building resilience process. So back in 2013, UN Habitat engaged in what we call participatory risk mapping, where everyone actually, someone was talking here, like saying, one of the panelists saying, we are not fast as we should. We have to act fastly. And this very small and intermediate city, Chokwe is a small city of around 160,000 people. And it's very small with challenges like weak institutional and technical capacity. And most of the time for us to build and to plan for resilience, I mean, towards climate change impacts, it's clear that we need data. And sometimes, in most of the cases, the available tools and methodologies are data hungry and kind of very complex and are not taking into consideration the people's knowledge. So we started to introduce this, what we call participatory risk mapping, where local people actually that have this collective memory of natural hazards, they were the ones mapping the city, identifying the hotspot, the risky areas, and also mapping out the city, including the updating of very, very basic infrastructures that are not even reflected in the local official plans, like urban structure plans. So this is one of the examples of how people feel part of a planning process that leads to decision making. And this actually led us to a very step-by-step experience in understanding how the participatory approaches bring extremely good and impactful results. Why? Because people learn. They learn and they understand what they're doing. And throughout this process, one of the we call innovative, is to actually use very clear and accessible languages. People in shock, regardless their literate level, can understand what is climate change. What is disaster risk reduction? Why are they living in a hazard-prone areas, and why they have to actually leave those areas? 2 years later, we had received a call from the mayor of Shock. We're very happy, just to let us know that actually there were people living in a very hazardous areas. They just decided to approach the municipality and ask the mayor to just relocate them. Usually the risk resettlement is the most challenging in most of the areas, because we know resettlement, involves a lot of things, including the accessibility to basic services, and also this feeling of belonging, to a place, into a space, and we know. But due to this comprehensive, and because people understood, we engaged them into understanding and to planning and to mapping, they understood that definitely they have to move. And this was one of the best experience that we have. In the same year, the ancient people supported the municipality to map natural water resources, water courses. And based on this local community, they open natural drainage courses, on their own, and without requiring local, additional resources. So this is one of the experience on how, when we do engage, it's actually how do we implement and operationalize the Agenda 2013, when we say, leave no one behind. Everyone has to be part of the process of the planning of their city. And then, as my colleague panelists say, in 2015, we had the opportunity to pilot this city resilience action planning tool, which is a bottom-up approach. It's a step-by-step where local communities and also local authorities can actually assess, understand, and plan actions for resilience for their city. And it engages in a very participatory way, and also in a very extremely and intense capacity building. One of the components of this tool is a crash course where key concepts about climate change, disaster risk reduction, resilience are transmitted to everyone, including local communities, based on their understanding. At a certain instance, we had to record to translation in local languages. One of the things that we usually ask is to ask local people, how do you call climate change in your local language? I could actually ask here, I don't know, all my co-panelists, we have many dialects in local languages, and how do we talk to any native person? What is climate change? So this is one of the first questions that we do. So to make sure that people understand what we are talking about, because knowledge is key. If we tell someone that you are in a disaster-prone risk area, this person needs to understand why. And this person do not have to attend a course, or a school to understand. We have to be able to give knowledge to people. And then there are all this process of step-by-step where people actually manage to identify actions for their resilience. One of the biggest challenges in this local governments, particularly in small and mid cities, is actually not only to plan, but also to budgets. And most of the times they lack tools to present even to donors on this is our priorities, this is what we want. Most of the times, external actors, they come and they say, well, we know that this city is prone to floods and this is what we are suggesting you to do. But thanks to this methodology and this tool, the city has this action plan that is endorsed by the municipality that counts with the participation of everyone in the city, communities, stakeholders, that everyone participates, and all the priorities reflected in that plan are actually done in a very participatory manner, and the prioritization as well, because actually there are a lot of actions, priority actions, but it is important to prioritize in a short, medium, and long term, particularly in a situation where the natural hazards are very frequent and intensity is more, and we have most of the time the very people that are very vulnerable. And history is key in this process. So usually are the same people that are actually suffering redundantly. And there is the vulnerability as well. The most interesting thing is when identifying this priority interventions is to make sure that vulnerable people are there. We have an experience coming from Xolkwe where we learned that usually during disasters, blind people are usually left behind. Who is taking care of them? When we are building, for example, for infrastructures like schools or any other infrastructure, who's thinking about those people with some disabilities? And during this process, when we identify these priority actions, even in that architectural point of view, people do not need to be architects. But it's important for you when you are designing it, you understand, how do I make sure that everyone has access to it? There are also cultural issues. There are gender-related issues as well that we make sure we take into consideration. But how is to make sure that people are there in the sessions, they participate in the sessions. And the good experience that I would like to share is that thanks to this participatory and inclusive process, the city of Xolkwe adopted the City Resilience Action Plan into its 5-year government plan. I think this is a very good experience on how also this process actually supports, the domestication of this process, as well as allocation of budget, because I don't think local governments as well have to rely only on external budgetary or allocation. So this plan became the main instrument for planning of the city. So all the activities that are implemented are also benefits, from the local government's budget to yearly budget. But then also thanks to this, we manage, as Regina say, this fund from the Adaptation Fund, which I'm managing. And that is actually supporting the implementation of some of the priority interventions of this action plan. They are integrated actions that show how do we build resilience in cities in a very integrated way. Most of the times, activities or actions are built or are integrated or invested in silos, but we can't build resilience if we just act on or drainage or other we act. So we have to look into a system that is interconnected in all these factors. So this project is supporting several activities or interventions that integrate tackle disaster risk management through interventions on drainage, on innovative early warning system like community radios, solid waste management, safe havens. It's an emergency safe haven where people can actually be there and safe during emergency, but it's a multi-purpose. So different ways, different activities and interventions that together work as an interconnected way to build urban resilience. But outstandingly, it's not exactly only these physical interventions. We do still engage with communities. They are part of this process because they follow closely this process. They are part as well of the management of these interventions. So because they have to learn and also to be part of it. So there is a strong components of ownership in this process. So they own, because they have the story, they have the memory, and they recall, this is what we actually identified as a priority action, and this is what is happening. So we are the owners, and we have to make sure that this is actually our own responsibility to make it happen. And I'm very proud to actually share here that recently, during the passage of Cyclone Freddy, around 500 people moved out from high-risk zone areas thanks to this community radio that we call an innovative early warning system that, due to its extremely good functioning, managed to alert everyone in time to move to safe places. And this engaged in a very locally owned manner in local language that everyone understands. So we were really proud to see that this is really happening, and the government in Mozambique wants to adopt it and to replicate, in the nationwide, to make sure that early warning systems at local level actually can benefit from this innovative early warning system. Recently, Mozambique also launched the Early Warning Initiative for All, and this came as well as a very one of the flagship initiatives for local areas. And just to finalize here is how to share with you how this project is influencing how to local interventions, like at local level in Chokwe, is influencing national policies. We just launched the process of developing a national decree for urban disaster risk management and urban resilience focused to urban areas in Mozambique, and we do expect that it's finalized by the end of this project. So I'll just, I've been informed about time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution and for talking to us about your experiences in Chokwe. So we have heard from our speakers about the increasingly urban nature of disasters in Africa, and of course the effects of Cyclone Freddy in Malawi is really a dire example of that. We've heard about the importance of preparedness in urban areas, of early warning, about planning and especially urban planning, and how to use planning to unlock financing, about secondary cities and systems of cities, and looking at how disaster cuts across different types of human settlements and how it needs to be addressed in terms of the unique circumstances of each of these different areas, about multi-level responsibilities and actions, and about the importance of participation and community engagement and ownership in the process. So I know that we're out of time, and I did have one more question prepared for each of our panelists, but I won't ask them. What I would like to encourage is that perhaps you stay behind for a few minutes and have some conversations after the official closing of our event, because I'm sure that you might have some questions that you would like to ask to our panelists. So if they would give us just 10 more minutes of their time informally, please. I encourage conversations and discussions to continue. And with that, I would like to thank all of the panelists for their contributions to this discussion, for giving examples from their countries, from their cities. And I would also like to thank the African Union Commission, Director Nyambe, and UNDP, who are our partners on this journey, as well as our other partners, such as the government of Sweden and the Adaptation Fund, who have already contributed to the African Urban Resilience Program, as well as the joint program of AUC, UNDP, and UN Habitat. And I invite all of you and your institutions to find out more by going to this. You could scan this code and you could find out more about our programmatic offer. And of course, our invitation for additional partners to join this huge regional effort in Africa to build urban resilience. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening. And thank you especially to our panelists and speakers. Have a good night. Merci beaucoup.